Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Today's Fireside Chat honors Black Mental Health Week. For far too long, Black mental health has been shaped by struggle, by the weight of systemic oppression, racial trauma, and the constant push for survival. But within that struggle, there is something just as powerful: joy. Joy as an act of defiance, joy as healing, joy as resistance. Today, we will explore how reclaiming joy can be a radical tool for wellness and liberation. Introducing our first panelist for the discussion today, Stacy-Ann. Stacy-Ann is an award-winning filmmaker, mental health advocate, and author of Good For You: 114 Mindful Practices Every Woman Can Adopt for a More Harmonious Life. She is the creator of the Blind Stigma documentary and podcast, and she has dedicated her career to dismantling mental health stigmas in Black communities. Hi, Stacy. Thank you for being here with us today.
Hi, everyone. So honored to be here.
Our next panelist is Asante Houghton, Unsinkable's program manager for storytelling. He's an activist, storyteller, and co-founder of the Reach Out Response Network. Named one of Canada's top 150 mental health influencers, Asante brings a deeply personal and transformative perspective on healing, resilience, and joy. Show yourself, Asante!
Hey everybody, what's good? How you doing?
All good. Thanks for being here, Asante. I'm loving that shirt.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Can't wait.
It brings a lot of joy. Good pick. And our last panelist is Nina Charlie, a community advocate, activist, and Unsinkable community champion who is working to break the silence around Black mental health through her online platform. She sparks meaningful conversations on the intersection of race, mental wellness, and identity, empowering others to reclaim their mental well-being. Hi, Nina.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And I love your background. It is so colorful and
Thank
powerful.
you.
And my name is Afrina. I am a storyteller, poet, and community leader dedicated to amplifying diverse voices in mental health advocacy. I will be your host for today, and I am hosting this chat from traditional territories of many First Peoples, Jojage, which is what Ganagahaga and now many others call Montreal. Before I dive into our discussion, I would like to mention that you, the audience, can leave your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom, and we will be responding to questions around 12:45 p.m. On the back end, behind the scenes, we have Taylor, our operations coordinator, who will be monitoring the chat and questions and sharing a list of resources at the end of the conversation. So without further ado, let's dive into our first question. And I can go ahead and moderate a bit in terms of like who gets to answer it. But if anybody wants to just dive in, this is a conversation for our audience to have more responses and most questions answered. I do suggest keeping the answers short, but feel free to dive in when you need to. Okay, so here's the first question. In a world that often associates Black experiences with struggle, how do you define joy as a form of resistance? And Nina.
Yeah, so for me, I think that joy is often a way of being an act of rebellion. Owning your joy is so huge. And Black life is beautiful. It's worthy of celebration. It's worthy of uplifting each other and hearing our beautiful, beautiful moments as well, and owning it.
Love that. You know what? Feel free to just keep yourselves unmuted and dive in.
Okay, I will dive right in. I love what Nina said, and I want to piggyback off of that because I think in this day and age, like joy is an act of defiance in a world that it often tries to define Blackness through struggle. And so for me, joy is radical because it disrupts the expectation of suffering. And it means prioritizing my well-being, whether it's big or small, and just being in spaces that, especially that were never meant for us. And joy is unshakable. It's just an unshakable reminder. And especially when you can blend that too with community joy, it's all good. But
Mhm.
Yeah, just to add my piece to the puzzle, what I really like about it is that, what's really interesting is that when you're out in the world as a black person and, when there's a bunch of black people together having fun,
Mm.
people look at you really funny. As if you're doing something strange, right? And I think that's really interesting in a way, and I think that ties into what you're saying, Stacey, and is that blackness is so heavily tied to struggle, but we don't need to struggle all the time. We smile, we have fun, we do things that are interesting and different. We frolic, you know what I
yes,
mean?
I love
Um,
that word. Yeah.
right. So for me, I don't even like I've gotten to a point where I don't even see joy as like an active resistance. It's more just the way I want to live my life. And if someone else feels that it's resistance, then that's more power to them. But for me, I'm just trying to bring more joy into it.
I like that perspective a lot. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, all of you, for that. That was really good. So let's get a bit more deeper and let's go for lived experience. But like, can you share a moment when you intentionally chose joy in the face of adversity and what impact did that have on your own mental wellness?
I can jump in here.
Yeah.
For years, I battled with suicidal ideation and depression. And till this day, I still live with anxiety. But for me, I think the moment I made a choice to center joy is by sharing my story and
Mhm.
is by celebrating every little win. Like after this panel discussion, I'm going to celebrate. I'm probably going to make myself a smoothie and I'm just going to celebrate because I celebrate every single thing. And so I've learned that instead of hiding behind my shame, I use my story and my voice to definitely empower others because I realize that you're not the only one. You're not the only one that's going through it. And so by creating dialogue, that just fuels change, right? And it feels like a community getting ready to help. So for me, that centered it. My personal journey made me realize when I was going through depression, especially, and depression is like living in a body that wants to live, but you have a mind that wants to die every single day. It's a constant battle. And when I was able to get through that, joy, joy.
Mhm.
It's really important for me to then make that choice to celebrate every single thing. But yeah.
Love that. That is so powerful.
I Everything you said is just so powerful in that. And I'm somebody who definitely struggles with depression very heavily. And working through that is such a trying task at times. And having those little celebratory moments that you said can change the entire trajectory of it. Um, and like having those small wins. I want to take that time to be happy. I want to take that time to feel joy in those phases of adversity because that's such an important thing for me to feel that and to continue moving forward in life and celebrating life because I deserve to celebrate my life. I deserve to feel happy in my life and not just see, other people getting that glamorous showcase of it. We deserve it as Black people as well because our life is so beautiful and so happy and so sparkly as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I definitely have struggled with that. And I want to choose joy more often for myself because I think I deserve it. I think we all deserve it.
I love that, Nina.
I love what you all are saying because I think what I'm hearing from both of you, and it's the thing that is true for me too, is making it a priority, right? Just being very intentional about it. And I was about 25 years old when I said to myself that I'm gonna make this a priority in my life. Like, this is gonna be the number one thing for me. Everything that I do, all the time that I spend, whether it's work, personal or otherwise, there needs to be some joy involved in it. Um, and once I made it a priority, it honestly really transformed my life and how I see things. And it became a lot easier to manage things like depression and anxiety, which I also struggle with, became a lot easier to, uh, you know, reconcile with trauma and coming from an upbringing that was very, very difficult. Um, one in which I wasn't celebrated. And, Afrena, when you asked this question, you asked for an example, and I was like, what is an example? And then I thought about it, and it was, I wasn't a person who had like any birthday parties growing up, because there wasn't enough family around. I was isolated, and because we didn't have any money. So I turned 25, 26, and I was like, I'm gonna start celebrating myself. So this is like, if no one's gonna throw me a birthday party, I'm gonna do it for myself. Um, my birthday is July 31st, so it's the end of the month. So what I started doing was I would celebrate the whole month. Like, this is me, this is my month. You know what I'm saying? And so I just started to like really celebrate myself that way. And I was so fortunate that I had, at that point, developed like a circle and a bunch of loved ones who were willing to celebrate with me. So yeah, I think it's just about like what both y'all are saying, Stacy-Ann and Nina, just being very intentional and making that space to celebrate.
I love that. That is really powerful, Asanti. And I love how you're taking your power back and stepping into your own and creating your own joy. Amazing. Really, really amazing. Um, okay, let's talk about how to break stigmas. So, mental health stigma is deeply rooted in many communities, including Black communities. How can we create safe spaces where Black individuals feel encouraged to seek joy and healing?
Yeah. I can start this one. I think open communication and sharing that we struggle with it. It's not just for one particular group of people. We all will struggle with our mental health. And having that acknowledgement is so, so important. Having the ability to be vulnerable and empathize with each other is so huge. And being able to support one another is really, really big. And remake the fear of seeking help, remove that. It's so important to remove any fear of seeking that help for one another as well, because for so long I feared it. I feared going and seeking that um, therapy. I thought it was such a weird topic to even go near because it couldn't be for me, you know. And removing any type of stigma around it is so, so important, I feel.
Yeah, I would love to piggyback off that. I love everything that you said, Nina, because we really just have to create safe spaces where we have to normalize conversations around mental health. I'm coming from I was born in Jamaica, and so being raised in Jamaica too, conversations around mental health, you can't have it. Like if you say something about mad, you're gone mad. It's very demeaning. Like you don't want to have it because it just puts you in a box. And so we have to normalize conversations. I think when we're talking about the Black community, we can normalize talking about going to the gym or eating this kind of food, going to church, church and therapy can be the same conversation. We can have those conversations and make sure that we're normalizing that. Another way too is what Nina said is that idea of strength. We seem to think that when we're silent and when we hold it all in and keep it all in, we're strong. And it's not. You're not strong at all. Strength, what strength really is putting it down. It is talking about it. Do you know how good you feel when you talk things out? And I really understand that whole stigma about keeping your business to yourself, or people are going to talk about your business and the shame that comes around it. But it's the shame and the secrecy that is what we've been sweeping under the rug for many years. It's like it's that big green and pink, hot pink and shocking color green elephant that sits right there in the room. And we do not address it. And we think that it's okay. And we keep on wearing this veil of shame. And it's also, and because of that, because of there's a stigma around talking about it, it makes mental health in the Black community the number one silent killer. It is such a silent killer. And it's so dangerous. So having normalizing the conversations really does matter. And also, I don't want to cry, Lord. Representation matters. So when we see Black therapists, when we see healers, when we see advocates, like what we're doing, like this conversation, there's somebody right now in the audience, it reinforces that seeking help is not a weakness, but it really is a form of self-love. I don't want to cry, y'all, but crying is strength, vulnerability is strength, but I'm
Mm.
still here.
Yeah, I mean, Stacy-Ann, release it if you got to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's kind of exemplifying your message, which is like you can't just carry it around in silence, right? The challenges and the struggles, and realistically, Black folks, we experience a lot of things that are challenging in this world because of racism and colonialism and the history of, slavery in the West and all of these different pieces. And there's a way in which our worlds are constructed where we're not supposed to acknowledge those things are real and that they have impact. Um, and in a way that contributes to the silence or the oh, that's just the way the world is, get up and go and keep moving through it. um and yeah, there is, a part of you that does have to keep moving through it, but I think that you can do that while also acknowledging, the difficulties that one can face while moving through the world. And in terms of normalizing it, absolutely, we definitely need to normalize the conversation around, Black folks experiencing mental health challenges and stress. And I love that you talked about shame, and how deeply that's embedded in many Black communities and Black cultures. But I think we also need to talk about the antecedent factors that are leading to this stuff too, because it doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? So I mean, yeah, personally and in terms of community, we have to do more too. But I think from like a global perspective, we also need to stop putting Black folks in a position where we need to be so strong all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there also, and you mentioned it earlier, Stacey, and I think there also has to be, a healthier relationship with our identities with respect to struggle, and that we can't, it's almost like we become addicted to the struggle sometimes because struggle means Blackness, right? And within Black communities, Blackness is so important to us to hold on to that, because it is resistance. But so a lot of these things are very complicated and deeply rooted in these historical and societal factors that also need to be acknowledged. um and I think that when we do that, it becomes easier to have the conversations and easier to normalize. But, we all have to make space for those conversations to happen. And when I say all, I don't just mean Black people, I mean all people need to make space for those conversations to happen, so that, we stop suffering from heart disease and hypertension and experiencing cancer, and mental health challenges at higher rates than everybody else, because that's what's happening right now. I'm not sure everyone's really aware of that, but not just Black mental health, but Black health is deteriorating, quicker than most other social groups here in the West. So, um, you know, yeah, we have to normalize the conversations and have the real ones that are necessary, and not put all the responsibility on us. We need to, open it up and see, like, what's really happening, and, you know, find that support as a community, a world community.
Absolutely.
Those it's all of you make such good points, but especially like how speaking up is also expressing vulnerability. It takes more strength to speak up. It takes more strength to be vulnerable, to cry in front of somebody else. All of these things take so much more strength than how much we perceive. They're not signs of weakness, they're actually signs of strength. And this is a great way for me to segue into my next question, which is about what is the role that community plays in Black mental health? So I know that you've talked about, Asante, how the onus doesn't lie just on Black communities, but holding those safer spaces and creating them for one another, including Black communities. But within your community, how can you lean on each other to cultivate resilience and joy both collectively? I understand that you did speak about self-care, Stacy-Ann, um, and we realize that self-care is really important, but that also doesn't happen just in isolation, right? How do we balance personal self-care with the need for collective care within your community? So that's something that I know I threw out like a lot of questions around the same gamut. So feel free to pick and choose or respond however you'd like to.
I can start. I can start by saying I I think sometimes I have an issue with self-care, and I understand self-care is very, very important, but there's I think the West idolizes self-care in the form of sometimes it's just a bubble bath, or I'm just gonna have a glass of wine, or I'm gonna do this, and sometimes it just puts a band-aid over truly what healing is. And I really truly believe that healing does not happen in isolation. It can't really. it's really hard to heal. And so when it comes to our community and just overall, just like whether there's a sisterhood circle, there's a brotherhood circle, there's therapy groups, there's storytelling. Storytelling for the Black community is so important. What we're doing right now is storytelling. When we asked about when you asked about the second question about our personal experience, that's storytelling. And people don't understand how profoundly impactful storytelling is. Community then reminds us that we are not alone. And I think because we're talking about mental health, especially in the Black community, we seem to think that we're the only one that's going through it. We're the only one, again, because of that shame and secrecy that is so packaged with it. So I think when we talk about healing, or we talk about self-care, it can also happen. Definitely, it doesn't happen in isolations. You have to create a space where you can find a safe space, and where you can really talk about it. Because when we share our struggles, when we share our joys, it truly creates spaces where vulnerability is then met with love and understanding. And not some people are going to get it, but the more we talk about it, I truly believe that that will happen. And I think that's where the root of healing starts, because I don't want to get too deep, but when we talk about the Black community and our mental health and going through healing, we have to talk about intergenerational trauma. And a lot of people don't know about intergenerational trauma and how that started. There is years in the 1800s, a psychiatrist by Samuel Cartwright, he described that an enslaved African that wanted to escape had to have a mental illness. And so drapetomania was labeled for our enslaved ancestors, because you have to have a mental illness to not want that life. And that has trickled and created such a ripple effect on how mental health is viewed in our community, and the fact about isolation. So we talk about, I'm going to try and give a brief history, and I'm not going to go too hard. When we talk about, for
No, do
example,
it.
Bellevue Hospital.
Yeah.
I'm from Jamaica. Bellevue Hospital. We used to make fun of Bellevue Hospital and be like, "You're mad, go on down to Bellevue Hospital, go back." That hospital was created to house our enslaved ancestors, to beat them, to torture them. It wasn't about your mental health. You were deemed having a mental health issue because you wanted to escape and to have freedom. And that's why freedom is so intricately linked to joy. And that's why having Black joy is so important. So to give you the history lesson, when we talk about healing, community, because it took our community to really heal. It's not with isolation. So self-care in the West, it idolizes what it truly is, but self-care can also mean coming together and knowing that you're not alone. I can't pause.
That's the mic drop. That's a mic drop moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Everything you
Um,
said. I'm
yeah.
at a loss for words right now. Like, absolutely. And what you said earlier as well is just the representation from community, because I came from somewhere where I was in a very predominantly white town where I saw no representation in anything. And for coming now to some place where I can actually see therapists that look like me and understand what I've gone through, understand that I have racial trauma, and understand that I was segregated in my own community, and can see that and help me through that and decolonize my own mindset is so huge, because I didn't get that growing up. I was so isolated and I had no community to lean on. And historically, we are such a group that leans on each other for survival, right? And growing up now, I'm almost 25, and at this age, just having that is it's sad, but I'm so grateful now that I have the community I do, and I can see that I'm on a panel with incredible people now where we can talk about this. And I didn't think I would have that when I was a little girl, but now I'm so grateful that we can do this and do stuff like this, because we are a community that needs this. And we will continue to do that, and we will continue to lean on each other, and we will continue to uplift our voices, because that is what is so important. And community is so important for that.
Like the self-care thing, I think is very important, because the way I see it is that, like, for me it's deeper than self-care. It's about self-love, right? And I think that the extent to which you love yourself is reflected in the actions toward yourself, right? But then when we bring the community aspect into it, it's like the extent to which, you're in a loving place is the extent to which, people are treating you in loving ways. And for me, love isn't just praise or celebration. It's not dismissing, it's not criticizing, it's not shaming. And those are some things that are, the criticism, the shame, the dismissing. Unfortunately, those are some things that sometimes are deeply rooted in certain environments. Um, and those things make people not want to speak out. So I think that one of the things that we can really focus on is how do we accept others with non-judgment? And how do we be curious instead of critical, right? And to learn more about somebody's experience, because I think that there's, we talk about Black people as if we are all the same, as if there is only one way to be Black, as if there is only, one way to experience trauma, if there's only one way to struggle and one way to do whatever, but we're also different. And I think that, we need to make space for folks to feel like it's okay to have a unique way of interpreting, their life, the world, how they've moved through it, how things have impacted them, etc. So that when we make that space for people to show up uniquely, that they feel comfortable in themselves and comfortable enough to feel safe, and so that they can be vulnerable. And within that vulnerability sort of acts as a thread that brings us together and ties us together. Maybe the wrong metaphor to use right now, but but um but it keeps us together in a way that we really are forming like these very strong bonds. And Stacy-Ann, you talked about storytelling, and I've ran so many workshops that were about like a particular topic or focus, and you bring the people into the workshop and they completely ignore the focus of the workshop, and they just want to tell their stories, right? And I found this, most within Black communities, and most with like Black folks who are like 40, 50, 60 years old, because they've never had a chance.
Yes, that
Mhm.
right there. Yes.
I'm gonna hold
Feel it.
hold us right there, because this is a perfect space for us to go into what I want to ask you next, and that is how you use storytelling and creative expression in your work, and how that creativity and the arts help in healing racial trauma and reclaiming joy. A little side note, while we were talking about self-care, I remembered reading a fact about it, rooted in a Black History Month at one point. And I put that in the chat because self-care was actually an act of defiance and really taking your power back. So today it's really distilled, Stacey, on what you were saying is really distilled to like taking a bubble bath, but it has very strong roots in Black history. And if you get a moment, just have a look at the chat. I put it over there because it was a bit longer, but it's beautiful. So coming back to my question related to your storytelling and your creativity. Um, Anybody who wants to continue. Asante, I feel like if you want to continue, feel free to just continue if you want to.
I mean, storytelling is everything for me. I didn't even realize I was a storyteller until people told me that I was. Story has just been a part of how I interpret the world since I was a kid. I've always been attracted to stories, and I've always told stories, to the chagrin of my family, because I talk too much. But but um, you know, for me, I think that we've all sort of had, well, not all of us, but probably a lot of us have had these experiences where, we have teachers or we go to presentations where they're just kind of delivering us the facts. And then
Hmm.
we tune out really quickly because just the facts by themselves can be boring unless for whatever reason you're one of these people. And no knock to these people that are really interested in the subject. But, for a lot of folks, they tune out. I think stories are a way to connect. Storytelling is art. And I think what art really is about crossing the barriers that intellectualism can sometimes put between us, and really allowing us to connect viscerally with my experience to yours. So for me, I try to inject storytelling into everything I do. Now that I know I'm a storyteller, I do it more intentionally. um but I think, when parents are trying to teach their children things, stories are very important. When we are having conversations with our partners about what our experiences are in life or in our past or whatever, stories are very important. So whatever the case is, stories are really, really good at communicating information that is very important to how we're experiencing life. So for me, I mean, storytelling is, yeah, it's vital, it's integral, it's necessary.
Yeah. For me, I think I use storytelling, of course, like in a creative way. I was a dancer from the age of 2, and a writer. And so my way of expressing and storytelling was through my dance and my movement, and allowing myself to express the pain I was feeling or the joy I was feeling, and having those small movements to connect with the crowd or connect with a single person in the audience and allow them to see exactly what I was feeling and have that moment. Um, and with my storytelling in my writing, I really just pour everything into it. And I want to just empty it all out. I want to empty the tank and allow someone else to feel it after. And everything you were saying, it just connects with me on a whole new level. So
Yeah, I will add to everything you both said. Yeah, storytelling is everything for me. I too pride myself as being a storyteller. I think my first example of storytelling was growing up in Jamaica and hearing my grandparents share a story about when they used to go by the river and collect the bucket of water, and there was no presentation, there was no pictures. You used your imagination, you made your imagination come alive. And now as a mom, I can share those stories with my daughter. And the thing is, storytelling is what keeps our history rich, and it passes down. I think everything is a story. One of my first experience of a storytelling too was when I was 8, and my grandmother was teaching me how to make soup for the family. And you get the dasheen. I mean, you get the carrots, you get the turnips, you get everything, and it's a story. You put in everything together in a story. You get the chicken foot, you cut off the nails off the chicken foot, you put it in a pot, you get the garlic, you get the thyme, you get the scotch bonnet pepper, and then what comes out is this beautiful soup of joy and love. And so when I look at everything in life, everything to me is a storytelling. The panel, what we're doing, we start backstage and we met backstage, and this is a story. Everything, it lives through art. So it's very deeply passionate for me, and it's one of the best ways that I think, as a mental health advocate, we can reclaim our narratives, because we're telling the stories that we're not taught, or stories that were hidden from us. And so it is everything, so much, so important.
I will love that. And I love hearing your story as well, Stacy-Ann, about making the chicken soup.
Chicken foot
And
soup,
it's so
yes.
different from any recipe I've ever heard at the same time.
Yeah.
So also like there's so much healing and so many stories in the way we prepare our food and the way that we, in our recipes, they also tell so many stories. I feel like every part of our culture, our community, there's so many smaller facets that we don't really maybe at times don't fully appreciate, but they tell our story when they're put together, and it's so powerful.
Could I jump in real quick,
Yeah.
Frena? Thank you, Stacy-Ann, for saying that. What you just said. One, I mean, no, I want chicken foot soup, but I mean, um, but beyond that, like I was also born in Jamaica, but I was raised here in Canada, right? So I came to Canada when I was a baby. I came to Canada when I was 2.5. Um, but I still feel this very strong connection with my culture. And
Mm.
where does that come from? It's not movies. It's the stories that I was told growing up. When my mom would call me into the kitchen while she was cooking, and she would just tell me stories. And I would sit there in silence and just, taking all these pieces. And it's like I was in the country. It's like I was living there myself. So that when I did go back and visit, it wasn't like I was going somewhere foreign to me. It was like I was going home,
Yeah.
right? So this is the power of story and what it can really do for people. And without those stories, I would have a very difficult time rooting myself and anchoring myself in my culture and in my identity and in my community and all the things that those pieces mean to me.
I have to jump into
Absolutely.
because I mean I have to, you know, my dad's from Jamaica, right? So um I learned just like you, when I got to go back and see everything, I was seeing it through his stories that he would tell me, right? And that is so, it's just so impactful that we all have that small connection, each and every one of us, on this incredible panel. And I just feel so filled with joy right now. I'm so happy.
I love it.
Oh, this is so wholesome. Okay, but now I have a more serious question. And this is that what are some of the biggest mental health challenges Black individuals face today, and how can joy be a tool to counteract these systemic burdens?
Yeah, I mean, suicide, just to put it out there, is I don't think we are, when I say we, I mean everybody, are fully cognizant of the impact of suicide in Black communities right now. Um, it's increasing. And but when you ask the question, Afrena, the first thing that I thought about was racism.
Mm.
I really think and believe that the impact of racism is extremely understated because within racism, there is stress. And stress is the number one killer of human beings more than anything. Stress causes everything. I was talking before about hypertension, cancer, heart disease, etc. Stress is leads to all of these things, even mental health challenges. Stress is and I've seen it within my family, and I've seen the impact of you know social inequities and racism and poverty um, within my family and how that's broken people down over time. And it's very insidious. It's the everyday of going out into the world and wondering, am I going to be mistreated today for reasons that are confusing, reasons that I don't understand? And then when I try to explain it to others, they don't get it, or they dismiss it, or they say it's not real, right? Which then puts you in this sort of cognitive dissonance of asking yourself what is real and what's not. And then you're just walking out into the world with or you're holding this stress. And every time I leave the house, unfortunately, I leave the house and I gotta put my vest on to protect myself, my imaginary vest. How am I gonna protect myself today when someone makes an awkward comment about me or my children or my hair or I'm tall, so that must mean I'm wicked at basketball or or all these little things, these microaggressions or full on overt aggressions that I deal with. Am I going to get called the N-word today? You know, so am I going to get accosted by law enforcement today, etc.? Am I going to get followed around the store today? This is what I think about. You know, sometimes the thinking is very conscious and sometimes it's subconscious, but it's there all the time. So there's a hypervigilance that doesn't really leave. And when you live in that state, there's a lot of stress that comes with it. And where all of that is created is racism. So I really think that we need to put more onus on how do we reduce racism in our society? How do we take it away? Not just reduce it, how do we get rid of it? Because we might think, oh, it's only affecting, the people who it affects most directly. But, what happens to me happens to you because that's just the way the world works. We're all connected. Anyway, I'm sort of rambling now, but that's what first came to mind for me, Afrena.
No, but you're so right because I mean, growing up, that was my daily, right? Being the only person who looked like me in my community, besides my family. Every single day I woke up, and there were days I didn't go to school because I did not want to interact with my peers and have to deal with the things that they would call me or the jokes they would make or the ways they would um, just completely take away every single piece of who I was.
Mm.
Um, and I'm not gonna go too much into detail because I will get extremely emotional about it. But being such a young girl and having to interact with the world with this perception that I was made to feel so small and insignificant because of the racism I faced at all times was just so impactful on who I am today as well. And growing up and now being in my mid 20s, I still have to wake up or stay up at night and think of those moments some days because it's so impactful on who I am now because they were just so brutal. They were brutal moments growing up and horrifying and vicious and violent. And it's a poisonous little claw that was just torn into my skin at times. And you don't escape it, especially if we're not dismantling it. If we're not just completely taking it away from who we are and our society, it will continue to impact the youth and continue to impact them as they grow up into who they are today. Um, so yeah, I had to throw in that because of course it stays with you. It really does. It stays with you. Anything that happened to you when you were a child stays with you as you are become an adult. So yeah.
Yeah, I love this space. I love that it's so safe, and I just want to piggyback off what you both said, and especially with racism. Like Asante said, that racism, yeah, it's so deeply rooted, and I think especially as a black woman, to be wearing this cloak of the strong black woman for years, years, not knowing that, and thinking it's a compliment when people say you're such a strong black woman. Please don't ever call me that ever again. For about 4 years now, I've rebuked that term. Do not call me that because I realized that in being so strong, it was just stripping me of my humanity and feel like I could just take it, give everything to me, and I could just take it. It's why black women overall in general, like our pain and our struggles, they're not even recognized or they're overlooked. It creates less empathy for us, and then when we lash out, all of a sudden you're the angry black woman because
Mhm.
of everything that we've been holding on and every lash that we've been taking, and when you finally let out, all of a sudden we're the big bad wolf. It's I think, yeah, so that word strong, I have a huge, it triggers me because I think for a long time I had been wearing that cloak, and I thought that I had to be strong for so many reasons. So for the microaggressions that I would deal with at work, oh, you change your hair again, or oh, you live here, but you're like, it's just, there's so much that I had to deal with, and I just had to put on this big cloak. And once I realized that wearing that armor of the strong black woman and that it was an assault on my mental health, I ripped that right off. I ripped it right off. And just to answer your question, racism, it's so deeply rooted, and then to pinpoint the strong black man or the strong black woman. So like Asante said, oh, you're gonna tell me I'm good at basketball because I'm tall. There's so much that we have to deal with, and yeah, I can see that it's heavy for me, that question, but I'm so glad that we're answering this for sure.
If I could say one last thing, um, a lot of what you said, Stacey, and really resonates, you know, um, especially with now having children and stuff like that. And, people ask you about what school your child goes to. And, I have the privilege of choice, but I still choose to send my children to school where they're going to see a lot of people who look like them. Sometimes these schools are in quote unquote bad neighborhoods, or the kids there, they're bad, but they're not bad. They're actually really great. But there's a stigma associated with it because if there's a lot of black people there, it must be bad. Um, right? Meanwhile, like all these kids are getting 90s and they're winning awards, and these are all like my kids' friends. Um, but bigger than that. I think that, you know, man, I had this thought and it's escaping me now, but from here it is that, within these spaces, and as important as storytelling is, right? Because that's what we've been talking about today, and I think that there is also a phenomenon where people only want to hear certain stories
Mm.
from Black folks. The story of struggle. Like when you look at like the movies, for instance, how many movies are there about that's just about Black people? That is not like Black people from the hood, or Black people during slavery, or Black people having to, conquer the racism to be the first ever of something. Like what about just like a Black family who's experiencing, the things that families experience, right? But then, within these spaces, I think that I've, experienced a lot, and I'm sort of breaking out of now, but it took a long time to get there, is for many, many years, people would say, hey, Asante, we'd like you to come into, talk to these kids, or talk to this university class, or, go on TV and essentially just tell my story. Almost like this, this, it, what's the word I'm trying to find? Um, it becomes like this trauma porn.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Um, but within the story are my experiences as a professional, my experiences, as an academic, in research labs, and doing all this work I've done with government, and all different parts of, so like essentially I have a lot to contribute with what I think as well, and not just my story of struggle,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
what I think about the world, and how the world can be different, and how anything can be different. I almost majored in mathematics, when I was in university, but I wasn't educated enough at that point to know where that would take me in life. Um, but the point is that we are more than just our stories of struggle, right? So when we talk about joy as resistance, that's a part of it. We're not just struggle, but we're also not just joy. We're smart,
Mm.
and we're creative, and we have so much to contribute, and we don't just want like a seat at the table. We just want a door to be open so that we have choices.
Yes.
Oh, that just gave me goosebumps. Like,
That is like so profound. Every one of you have shared stories and insights which are so profound, and help somebody like me who might be on the outside to get a glimpse of your personal stories, the racism and the weight of it that you carry, and your armors that you've built. Um, I'm gonna go on to the next question, which is talking about how it is, the fight for racial justice is often heavy and exhausting, right? This is which is what I'm hearing from all of you. But how do you maintain joy while doing advocacy work? So you're standing up for yourself and your communities, but at the same time, how do you maintain joy?
that's a very, very loaded question for me, because for so long I've been doing advocacy work, and there were times I just completely burnt out. But every single day I wake up and I know that I'm choosing joy as a form of radical liberation for myself.
Yes.
Um, and I have to do it. I have to do it for myself, for a younger version of myself who faced so much and deserves to feel that joy, because we all deserve to feel that joy. Um, Forms to continue to maintain a good head on your shoulders and good, it's just, it can be exhausting. It can be exhausting, and you're allowed to feel exhausted. And we need to make sure there's room to feel exhausted. And I think we can all agree with that. Um, but doing it for a younger version of myself is what keeps me going, I think.
I love what you said, Nina. And for me, I've prioritized rest. I think when we talk about rest, especially in the Black community, we don't take enough and we don't think that we have time. I remember my friend sent me this meme of this comedian just reenacting what a Jamaican culture was, and I was like, oh my gosh, I found this a little bit triggering. It's funny, but it's triggering. And so it's this girl, she comes home and she just told her mom, oh, I washed the dishes. And mom's like, oh, the time you took to wash the dishes, you could have baked the bread, you could have done this. It's just like, you never have time. The time that you took to do this, you could have done this. And it's just like, you always have to continuously do. And I think, and that's a form of intergenerational trauma that we're living through, where we feel like we have to continuously do. Who made us continuously have to do work in order to feel like we're valued? And you can just rest. And so I've prioritized by making sure that I rest. It's so important. And resting sometimes is doing nothing. Maybe I'm on my phone scrolling social media. Doing nothing is still doing something. And so I take my time to make sure, especially with my advocacy work, to rest. I also make it a point now to only take jobs or to only align myself with jobs that are definitely alignment in my career. So I used to be the girl that says, "Oh, I am booked and busy," and now I'm like, "No, I am paid and peaceful. I'm not taking any stress money. I'm not taking anything that's just gonna stress me out. I'm not. My joy and creating a life of luxury and softness. Rest is such luxury that we don't even know that it's truly there for us to take. And so that's the biggest thing for me is just to rest, sit back and gift myself that permission to rest. Because for the longest while, I felt like I just had to keep going, 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 going. And that is not sustainable. And understanding that, I realized just rest. Just rest, girl. You deserve it. Rest.
I love that, Stacy-Ann, because rest is truly an act of rebellion. And in a time when we are peppered to be continuously doing something, always be plugged in, always be, so I truly hear you on this one. Asante, I know you have something to say.
I don't really have much to add. I was just gonna say that, I deserve it.
Yes.
Uh, I deserve rest. And I deserve joy. And when that became really entrenched in my mindset, I started to really prioritize it. I remember when I was doing, the advocacy work for Reach Out Response Network here in Toronto, which, led to the Toronto Community Crisis Service here. I was working a full-time job, working 6 days a week actually, while also probably spending like a good 30, 40 hours a week on this advocacy. Like felt like no time. Um, while also trying to like balance a family. And, I was once on a TV or radio interview or something like that, and someone asked me, how do you keep it together with being so busy? And I said, I make it a priority every single day to take 2 hours for joy and for rest. And that's how I was able to make it through. Um, and for me, that, it's yeah, we deserve it. We have to give ourselves permission, but I also think it's vital. It's a health thing.
Mhm.
Like in order to keep your health moving in the right, to upkeep your health properly, you need to take that time. And and there have been times where I haven't done that, and it's led to not great consequences. So even now more than ever at this stage of my life, am I committed to making sure that rest, joy, happiness, laughter, conversation, community, these are a part of my life.
I love that. Yes.
Laughter is so healing, you know?
Yes.
It is. It is.
Before I go to our last question, quick note to people in our audience, I don't see any Q&A, any boxes, any questions in the Q&A box. So if you want to ask a question, now's your time. I do see a comment in the chat box, which I'll be happy to read out, or we can have a look at after this question, which is our last question. So if you could create a world where Black joy and mental wellness were truly prioritized, what would that world look like? And what steps can we take to get there? Bring your wish list. Come on, this is the time.
I think for me, it's just feeling represented. You know, that is so, so important to me. I just want to see myself in all of these formats and jobs and places where I can access the mental health and the health resources. I want to be able to find others who share my story and circles where we can discuss it, and having that and prioritizing Black mental health is just such an important and beautiful thing that we need to do. Um, Things like this, having them reoccurring, that's such a beautiful thing and such an important thing. It's a vital thing. Um, there's so much on the wish list that you can do, right? And of course, it's a dream, but it should be a reality.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, it's so true. I could definitely add to that too. I think just seeing a world where we just like Black joy and our mental wellness is where healing is definitely accessible. Therapy is normalized, and rest is respected.
Mm.
And I also want to see a world where, we don't have to earn peace. It is given. I have this favorite affirmation that I like to say, one of my decolonizing affirmations where I like to say, and it goes something along the lines like, my value is not connected to my ability to endure struggle, and I don't have to suffer in order to learn my lessons, and I don't have to accumulate mental and emotional scars in order to prove my strength. And I think just overall, just putting it all together, like, we just have peace. Just give us peace and give us these healing spaces, and yeah, there's so much to add to that, but that's what's coming up for me now. And just piggybacking off what Nina said too, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Um, you're gonna have to send that one to me. Um, that's real. That's super real. As someone who's like a lot of his life has been defined by the trauma that, that's kind of been a lot of my life. It's been defined by trauma. Um, and I'm trying to, move into a space where that's not the case. Um, but anyway, to answer the question, Afrena, yeah, again, what came to me is a world without racism. 'Cause I really do, again, I do think that there is just such an impact there. But deeper, not deeper, but maybe parallel to that, a world in which Black folks are seen as whole people first,
Mm.
right? Because what I've experienced, probably what a lot of Black people have experienced, probably, probably other folks who are marginalized in different ways, is when you show up into the world, people have their assumptions about who you are. And when it comes to Black folks, a lot of those assumptions are that we don't experience pain, or that we're strong or tough enough to experience anything. And just walk through we're resilient, and we are resilient, but in such a way that we can't, break down or have difficulties, or, you know, like, we are whole people. And I think that when we are seen as such and treated as such, the game changes for all of us.
Absolutely. Yes. I have one question from the audience. How can we encourage family, friends who are experiencing challenges like immigration struggles or work challenges, that there is still room for prioritizing mental health, joy, and rest without coming across as insensitive to their struggles?
Ooh, it's a really good one.
Yeah.
Can you read that one more time, Afrena?
Yeah.
How can we encourage family and friends who are experiencing challenges like immigration struggles or work challenges, that there is still room for prioritizing mental health, joy, and rest without coming across as insensitive to their struggles?
I think acknowledging that they're in fact facing those things, but
Mhm.
giving room to support them and being a community for them is so important, because of course these challenges are difficult and they are a struggle, but providing that space for them to lean on you is such an important thing. I think that's a really beautiful thing that you can do for them.
I agree with that. Acknowledging that, what they're experiencing is very real for them. And, I think that the useful thing sometimes too is not to lean on the mental health terminology, to really frame it through the experience. Um, you know, and to sometimes you kind of have to know what is stigmatized within the culture so that you can frame things in a way that's not going to, knock on the door of that stigma and get people on alert. So it's how do we talk about the thing without making it stigmatizing? Because if we talked about it, maybe the way that we're talking about it in this panel, it might be stigmatizing for folks. So we're really just honoring their experience and acknowledging it, and also finding a way to start that conversation. And like Nina, you were saying, is making space for not just their immediate experience, but what else can fit within the paradigm of healing to build into their life.
Also maybe holding space, because I feel like when somebody is going through so many struggles and we as people who care for them want them to have a breather or want them to have relaxation, maybe if we do something for them that gives them that space and holding that space for them quite literally, it also could prove valuable.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Same.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
perfect.
I have nothing to add. I think Nina and Asante
Yeah.
said yes.
No, it was really well put, Nina. So thank you very much. Before we wrap up our discussion for today, I would like to mention that we at Unsinkable have a nationwide presence, and we have a program to support workplace mental health, which is called Unsinkable at Work. Feel free to contact me. I'm going to put in my email address in the chat right now. And to learn more about how we can organize a training, workshop, or talk on mental health at your workplace. And before we end today's discussion, I want to thank many people on the Unsinkable team who made today's event possible, and in no particular order. Yes, Asante?
I also wanted to say, I am the manager of storytelling at Unsinkable. So if there's
Yeah.
anybody in the audience who does want to tell their story, please reach out to Afrena, myself, Unsinkable, and we'll try to make it happen.
Good plug-in, Asante. I should have done that, but I'm happy you did it. So, thanking people on the Unsinkable team, Taylor, Jerusha, Mike, and on that note, I know that Taylor will be uploading or putting a link for resources, which the panelists and I put together for today's discussion. And on that note, I want to thank you, our esteemed panelists, and you in the audience for coming out today and attending. A recording of this talk will be uploaded on our YouTube channel next week. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good day, y'all.